podcast where two longtime friends and sometimes a guest talk about their favorite games from the perspective of an average player. My name is Andrew Kimball.
And I'm Dylan Wren, and we are your friendly neighborhood gamers. Welcome back to the neighborhood. My name is Dylan Wren. I am trying to corral my two friends, Delaney and Aubrey, for yet another podcast where we ramble because Andrew is sick and we had to do something last minute. So
you're welcome.
Enjoy. Yes.
Yeah. We're like the people that are on stage between acts and they're like, vamp, keep the audience going.
Aubrey, you know what we need to take some time to do before this happens again in a week and a half? We need to come up with a rider of like all the stuff we want. Like, I need you to DoorDash me some sushi. I want like a whole, this is my list of demands.
I want a case of Olipop in my green room. Also, I want a green room.
We're not sponsored, but Olipop, DoorDash, if you hear this and want to, go for it.
Any sushi place.
Yeah, just any, yeah.
Not sumo.
Okay.
Not sumo.
Well, now we will never be able to be sponsored by Sumo Sushi, so thank you for that.
I'm saving you the food poisoning.
I
don't
trust
need to eat the food. We just want to take their money.
As someone who's allergic to fish, ordering sushi, I refuse to believe you had food poisoning.
No, I don't think
it was probably just cross-contamination.
It was definitely cross-contamination, but the fact that there was some sticky situation, you could get food poisoning. They're clearly not running a clean kitchen.
Anyway, thank you both for being on. I do think that it will be hopefully a fun conversation.
Sure.
Even though it is a bit last minute. It's one that we had talked about potentially doing before. I think the last time that this happened and we did a Cozy Games episode. Fingers crossed the audio for this one turns out better than that one.
I mean, you sound way better to me.
Yes.
I don't know if that's translating to Audacity.
Yeah, the Discord app did not play well with my computer having Audacity open at the same time. And so I'm just using Discord in the browser, which works fine for me.
I mean, we're not here to give a concert. You get the sound quality you get.
Yeah, Andrew will disagree with that when he's editing, but he'll just be like, damn it, Delaney. And then you won't hear about it. So anyway, today we are going to be talking about board games and more specifically like the digital versions of board games, but there will likely be pretty heavy board game talk in there as well. Before we get into that, though, I have a question for the two of you.
Yes.
And that question is, what is the game that you have played for the longest time? You can either interpret that as the most amount of hours, or you can interpret that as like, I've been playing this game since I was 7 years old, and I am still playing it today.
Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess.
All right.
Played that a whole bunch as a kid. Had several save files on it, and then years ago, Joe bought a GameCube in order to like be able to replay some of those, and I think we may have even still had our copy of Twilight Princess for the GameCube, and we gave it to him. And then a few years later, he was like, I mean, I never play this thing, so sure. And he gave it to me. So when Tears of the Kingdom came out, I booted up my old Twilight Princess save.
There you go. It is the only Zelda game besides Breath of the Wild that I've ever finished. So it's a very good game.
I think it's structured really well in order to help you get from like start to finish. Like Majora's Mask is really complicated. And then even Ocarina of Time, it does not explain a lot to you, which some people really love. Some people really love when the game's like, yeah, go figure it out, explore, have a good time. I like quest markers. I like maps. I like sections being open when I'm ready to go into them. So Twilight Princess is the Zelda game for me.
Yep.
I know nothing about Zelda. But I think if we're like if I go with longest period of time, not like I've poured the most hours into this, I think I would have to say something like Mario Party if we count like all the iterations of it. Like that was one of the first ones I think I've played and still occasionally will play I don't even know what version.
Yeah, I don't Yeah, because they stopped numbering them after a certain point, and we're just like Mario Superstars or Mario whatever,
like All
whatever.
Stars or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah,
Did not love the newest, or well, I say newest, the newest one I have played, the one on the Switch where you have like your
the first one on the Switch.
Yeah.
Where it's like all like use your Joy-Con to be
Yeah.
Yeah.
use your
we did,
single Joy-Con.
we did like 100% that one
We
weekend
did.
when I
Yeah.
first got it. Like it held our attention enough to do that, but also it's not the one we're like, let's circle back and play that one again. It's like, nah.
No, the maps were
Yeah.
a little bit lacking. I didn't like the duos mode,
Mhm.
but I
Yeah.
did love that you could have a buddy. That was the best part, or whatever they
The
call
ally
them.
system got
there
you
it
good.
was. Oh man,
Yep.
that was a great add to that game.
It is, yeah, and that is very on brand too for today, because we will probably touch on Mario Party in a little bit, as it is kind of a big board game mixed with mini games. So,
Yeah.
I think the one that I have played for the longest is Majesty. I mean, I interpret it as like longest amount of time because I will still play that and boot that up to this day.
You were playing
You
it
know,
the other day
occasionally
when I
just
was
to,
on the
like-
phone with you.
Yep, because it's a good game, and it was one of the first like computer games I ever owned as a child. So, Majesty is my answer.
I mean, that one goes pretty far back for me too, but I haven't booted it up in a while, so.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was at least playing it in like 2004, 2005,
Mm-hmm.
if not maybe 2003. So almost 20 years at this point, if not 20 years. So
But like,
they should make
how
a new one.
how do you still play that?
What do you mean? How do I still play it? It's so good.
Not how, but like on your computer, you just have
Yeah.
the file.
It got a re-release
Majesty?
on.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
okay.
on Steam.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And there's a
Yeah.
mobile version on iPhone.
Anyway, we will jump into the main topic, which is board games and like their digital board game versions. Because we have all, especially during the pandemic, I feel like kind of got more into like the digital board game side of things.
Managed to convince a lot of people to buy Wingspan on Steam.
Yeah. You were they should reach out and partner with you to
I've been quite the ambassador.
yeah, it's like every time a new Wingspan expansion comes out, just be like, hey, tell your friends to
Hi.
buy this. But yeah, so I figured first we could maybe do a brief overview of like just board games and how you like them in general. Full disclosure, we all like board games. We're not those people that like hate them, but also that's mostly because we don't just play Monopoly. So
Right?
but yeah, board games are like one of my big hobbies. I have like a whole wall of them.
Do we have a current
And-
count on how many you have?
Somewhere, but not easily accessible
Okay.
to me.
If
on the
we're
fly.
estimating over 50.
Yes, definitely
Easily.
over 50.
Probably close
It
to 100.
depends on
if
how
not
it-
over.
Yeah, I was gonna say it depends on how it counts like expansions and stuff. Because it's like for some of the games I'll have like four, like Root.
Yeah.
I have like 4 or 5 expansions for, and they all take up space on my shelf, but it's technically still just Root.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably somewhere between. If I had to guess, I'd probably say 75. Because like I have a bunch of just like small, like little card games and stuff. But yeah, so I've been playing and collecting board games. You know, like obviously growing up, we had your standards: Clue, Monopoly,
Mhm.
Scrabble,
Life.
Sorry, Life. Yeah,
Uno.
like your Candyland. We had our standards. But at some point, I was in a store, or I think Catan was probably my like intro.
Okay.
Yeah, like the gateway.
I played Catan in college and got it and brought it home, and then also like was looking more into like, oh, okay, like this is actually much more fun than like Monopoly or some of those more standard boring ones. And so I started looking at more diverse board games selections and board game stores and that sort of thing. And so
Yeah, you were absolutely my gateway into more complicated and more involved board games.
What
Yeah.
would you say is your favorite type or style of game, Dylan?
I
Like if you had all willing participants, because I know a lot of your game playing, you do tailor it to the group you're in, and you're very good about this is what this group of people would want and enjoy, and you like playing games with people who want to play them, so you do tailor what you play. But if you had a full group of willing participants who wanted to play whatever you wanted, what is the kind of game that you want to play?
There are a couple that like fall into this. That's mostly like the like Twilight Imperium / I'm blanking on the name of it. But it's like kind of the big space 4X type of games where it's like you can kind of go multiple different ways with it. Like you can build up like technology and, you know, kind of like a big RTS or something. It's like, okay, I'm building up all this technology, or I'm exploring the galaxy, or I'm, you know, getting into battles trying to take over planets and that sort of a thing. But like the human element of other people being there, where it's like you can negotiate. You can kind of like the Game of Thrones board game, where a lot of it comes down to like, okay, I'm going to negotiate. Like, you don't attack me, you go over here and attack this other person, or the Dune game or something like that. So
I have not played the Game of Thrones board game since the disastrous time Aubrey and I got put on the same team, and she just started throwing notes at people.
Yeah.
Well, we were the North, you know, we were stuck up north, but so everybody's down like south competing and stuff. I at that point had never watched any Game of Thrones. And so all I knew was winter is coming. And so I would just write it down on tiny sheets of paper and throw it at Dylan, because we're from the North, and the North is telling people that winter is coming, right? I think
I was one of the, I forget who it was, like if I was the Greyjoys or somebody else who was like stuck in the unfortunate place right between the North and like the South. So I was getting like just beat up on both sides because you guys
couldn't reach anybody else.
Yeah, like you guys had one direction you could go, and it was into my territory. And I think like down south they were fighting each other.
The whole King's Landing stuff was going on. Yeah.
So also Aubrey and I were playing cribbage the whole time.
Yes, we were also just playing cribbage with each other. Another great game. So you like multiple like ways to win.
Yes.
Like multiple directions you can approach the objective of how to get to the win. You like kind of a social element of some bargaining and some wheeling and dealing. And then a sci-fi theme probably doesn't hurt either, huh?
Yeah, a sci-fi theme doesn't hurt. The theme is not as important as like a good theme, I think, will really sell a game. Like Nemesis is like a game that is basically Alien, the board game. Mm-hmm. And it has like a hidden traitor in it, potentially, and you're trying to like accomplish objectives while the ship is being overrun by aliens that are trying to kill you, and like get to a life pod and like get out of there. But there also might be somebody who locks you in a room with aliens because they're a traitor, and their goal is for you to die.
Yeah.
So that does that theme very, very well. But also I have played just like, oh, this is a game about trains, which I don't care a whole lot of, like Ticket to Ride. Like,
yeah,
I could really care less about building a railroad track across the US, although that is a very good idea.
We should do that.
But it is very much like a, you know, like I could really care less about railroads.
So the mechanics are more
the mechanics
important.
Are good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know Delaney loves building machines.
Yes.
She loves to build a point machine. Does that hold like some appeal for you, the idea of like getting something like that rolling, or is that kind of that's not like your go-to way to play?
That is more like fighting games for me, where I enjoy it in concept, but then Delaney's annoyingly better at it than I am for absolutely no reason. And so it's just kind of like, eh.
That's so true.
But in the world of like board games and like video games, that's the one thing I have. I'm better at you than like machines, and I'm better at you than fighting games. Those are the only things in those realms I am better at you than. And just let me have it. Yep. Just let me have the one thing.
Yep. So I enjoy those games, but when I play like a game like Wingspan or something with Delaney, or Everdell, it's always just kind of like, well, I mean, I'll do my best, but really I'm just playing for second place here.
Which is like so hilarious, because when the two of you like then bring those kind of board games to a more casual group, like that one time you first years ago, you two like both came and pulled out one of those social deduction games. I can't remember which one it was. It was like I think it like the royalty themed one.
Was it the Resistance,
or I think it was the Resistance
or Coup.
Maybe it might have been Coup. And the way that you two together just tore the room apart. Like the two of you, like that was infamous. For months, people were like, do not play those games with the Wrens. Like, because the two of you had an understanding of it that none of the rest of us had. And you weren't like consistently hanging out, which I had like just started hanging out with like Andrew and Abby again and like that whole crew. But like they didn't have as good a beat on y'all's personalities. It was like months after that when everyone was like, still just, oh my God, I can't believe like what Delaney pulled off with the whatever. Like,
Yep.
So like, yes, you're playing for second place in Wingspan when it's like the three of us, but also in any other room, you two could dominate at most board game things.
We should look into that. We could do so well.
We just missed Gen Con. We just missed it.
What is that?
Gen Con is like the big board game convention somewhere in like Indiana or somewhere with corn. I don't know.
It's corn.
I'm sorry if you live there. It's probably wherever Jay is from the Super Bracket Brothers. Indianapolis, Indiana is where it is. I don't actually know where Jay is from, but
Atlanta's got a convention coming up soon. That's
Dragon
not too far
Con,
from
yep.
us.
But Atlanta.
And anywho, yeah, but Atlanta.
well, you can get to Atlanta. All flights get into Atlanta. They just don't leave Atlanta. So,
Yeah, the 12 hours I just spent there speaks to that.
yeah. So besides building an engine, Delaney, or if you want to talk about building an engine.
I really love it. Asynchronous games. Root was one of my absolute favorites because everyone has their own set of rules. I love when there are different win conditions like Dylan was talking about. So it's not necessarily immediately obvious what you're doing and people are just like, I hate when it's just like you're doing really well and then just everybody is going to railroad you because
They're like dogpile on you.
Yeah, because there's one way to win and you have to get 10 points and you're at 9. And I don't love those. I like to be a little more clever
The
about
Munchkin.
it. Oh my God.
Yeah, the Munchkin or the Risk.
Yeah, Munchkin I always tried to like double point at the end, like 8 and 9 or like 9 and 10 just because it got crazy and there was no way to end it.
Yeah.
But Root, I think, has been one of my favorites because there are so many different, like, everybody plays their own faction. Everybody does their own thing. You win in different ways. I love Wingspan. I love games with no direct competition where you can win without screwing over the other people. Like, you can live in your own little bubble. People can choose to do their things. And, like, you play the game. And winning is not, the requirement for winning is not destroying other people's whatever they've built.
Yeah. In Wingspan, you can very rarely negatively impact somebody else's board.
Exactly.
Yeah, like the worst you can do is you can take the bird that they wanted, but it's still like not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Well, there may be like, gosh, I want to say there's like one in one of the expansions. I think there's like a where you can steal a bird maybe or steal eggs or something like that with one of your birds. But like it's so, if you're playing with the expansions, you've got hundreds of birds to like roll through. You may never even come across it. But yeah, where you're kind of basically just competing with yourself to see how good of a game you can play. Like ultimately, like we're competing, but also you and I are both going to reliably get, I say that, but we've had so many games where we're like, this is a 60-point game. No, like nothing I can do. Like the cards are in your favor. But we're both like kind of racing for a similar goal. Like if we can break 100, that's when we're like, oh yeah, like we played a great game. Like even if you had 103 and I had 100, that was still a killer game.
Oh
like,
yeah, anytime one of us breaks 100 in Wingspan, we're like, oh my gosh, great game. You did amazing.
Like, look at us go.
Real proud. Plus it's so pretty. I love an aesthetic board game.
Yes.
So we were at a board game cafe in Philadelphia recently. and they had a game master or whatever they called him. And so Aubrey and I were playing a bunch of games and trying them out, and we were looking for a new one. And he asked what kind of game we were looking for. And he's like, I've noticed everything you've picked is very aesthetic. Is that something you're looking for?
It had lots of very nice artwork.
Yes. I want it to be pretty.
Yep.
I do appreciate that. Or like eye-catching in some way.
Well, what do you look for in a board game?
Who,
Aubrey?
me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Gosh, that's kind of tough because I don't know, I want it to be fun, and that's like impossible to quantify.
Yeah.
I do really like the like kind of different set of goals. Like we're not racing for the same trophy. I really love any kind of game where I can kind of drift into the background and slowly work towards my goal. And even to a certain extent, like I'm thinking about Twilight Imperium as I'm thinking about this, because depending on like the alien race you play, you can be a lot more cooperative. You can be a lot more like, yeah, no, like do your thing. And you're like quietly accumulating points over here. Like in Root, partly just to like make the game flow a little faster. And because I like know it, I'll play as the River Otters. Because like, yeah, like let me help you achieve your goal. Take some mercenaries. Here's some travel. Like, yeah, just give me a little money. Let me get a few points. I don't win often with that kind of strategy, but also like I do like the kind of asynchronous mutual success kind of a thing, like with Wingspan type deal. Obviously, you know, you like to win, but I'm more interested in everybody having fun at the table than like me winning in particular.
Yeah. Like it's fun to win, but
Yeah.
as long as everyone had a good time, even if you don't win, it's still like fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like Wingspan is going to come up a lot this episode, and the story of how we got into it still makes me laugh.
It's a good story.
So Dylan, as we've discussed, has 75 plus board games. And as you might imagine...
I just pulled it up.
Okay. How many do you have?
This says 100 and... Wait. This is including...
I feel like expansions count. They cost anywhere from $20 to $40. Count them.
Yeah. This includes some of my wish list, so I'm going to like cut it down a little bit. But I would... It's saying somewhere around like 140.
Oh my god.
140.
Nice.
Wow.
I will say, thinking about it, and like the, you know, what does it count twice? Because you have like Betrayal at the House on the Hill, and you also have Betrayal Legacy.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying our playthrough of Betrayal Legacy because you're like re-entering the house so many times. The stakes feel kind of way lower. Like I don't care if I'm the traitor. I don't care really if I win or lose. Like, yeah, again, winning is like fun, but also I'm probably going to play as a new character next time anyway. Like, it's not going to roll through. So something with like a narrative through line like that is also fun.
I have really
Like
been enjoying
Gloomhaven.
the Betrayal Legacy with the overarching story, but like you're still having mostly the same gameplay. You just have like, it feels like a Monster of the Week TV show where
Yeah,
like you have a story going on in the game, and then there's like a longer seasonal journey.
Yeah.
And the sessions are much
Yeah.
shorter, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, for people who are not familiar with the board game scene, a legacy game is a subset of board game where it has like, you start out with a very basic game, and then as you play like multiple times the same game, it adds in like new rules and new things. There's usually like a box that's similar to like an advent calendar, where like after you beat the, like, depending on the outcome of game one that you play, it'll be like open box 23, and so you'll open it up and it's like, here's a new thing that changes how you play the game a little bit.
Add card whatever to the deck, and then it's like, ooh, a new thing. Dopamine.
I really love that about Gloomhaven too. When we played that, is constantly getting like new little things that change the gameplay just a little bit.
Yes. So they are very cool games. Usually a little bit more expensive, but also like a very like cool way to play a board game.
But yeah, anyway, sorry, you were telling the story of getting Wingspan.
Oh yeah. Okay, so Dylan has now confirmed 140 board games. And as you might imagine, if you're looking to buy him a present for a birthday or Christmas or whatever, board games might be a thing he would enjoy. So I generally try and get something like that. And one year I bought and had to return 3 separate board games. One of them, Betrayal Legacy, because he already had them or somebody else bought them for him. And I kept seeing Wingspan, but for some reason I just didn't think it was going to be a good game. I didn't think we would like it. It seemed
Sometimes aesthetic games are just all flash, no substance.
yeah. I don't know. I saw it a lot. It came up a lot. I kept seeing it and going, ugh, no. And then after having to return the third game, I got annoyed and was like, screw it. That's what he's getting. I don't care anymore. Turns out it's amazing and we all love it. But
Turns out it's like the best game in the last 5 years.
But I did buy it out of pure spite. 100%.
That is fair. But it is a very fun game. Like you're drawing cards, you're getting to play cards, and they do like eventually they do things, and as you play more of them, you get to do more things. So it kind of, that's why they call it an engine builder, is because you're kind of building the engine as you go. And during the pandemic, while we were all separate places, not able to hang out, that is, we got into the Wingspan digital side, and so we're going to shift into like the digital side of board games, which, because this is a video game podcast, I guess, and so this is the digital versions of these games. I would say kind of count as a board game, you know, but also as a video game.
It's the exact same mechanics, just
in
Wingspan's case, very excellently digitized.
Yes, and I believe the Wings, like it's definitely on PC and Switch.
It is
I don't
now
know
on
if it's
mobile.
also...
It is on mobile.
Okay.
And I'm annoyed you haven't bought
It's
it
only
yet.
$10. It's only $10.
Now, the first one we really got into, I would say mobile, like the three of us. Well, I don't know if Dylan did, but Aubrey and I got into Ticket to Ride.
Ticket to Ride.
Yeah. Because we used to like go to like the movie theater or something, and while we were waiting for the movie to start, we'd all just be playing a big like Ticket to Ride game. So,
And I would argue Ticket to Ride to this day probably has the best mechanics to be digitized via mobile.
Yeah.
I almost would rather play Ticket to Ride only mobile for the rest of my life, because you don't have to keep up with the score, which is the most annoying part of Ticket to Ride.
But I don't think the gameplay loses anything at all by digitizing it. It makes it easier. It keeps up with how many cards you have. Like it's the perfect translation.
It works so well for pass and play too. And it's easy to like drop down and like pick back up. Like I started a game when like Abby and I we were on a double date with like Andrew and Joe, and it was like made it sound like Andrew and Joe were together. But anyway, and so like just while we're waiting for our table, like Abby and I are doing like playing pass and play, and then weeks later we were sitting around waiting for something else, and I was like, and I pulled it back up, and it's like a nice straightforward concept, so it's easy to just jump right back in and keep rolling.
Yeah. And we've played the Root game. Like that's another one that I would say we've played more extensively than a lot of the other ones, because now we kind of just play games in person a lot. But Root is the other one where it has been adapted to the digital side of things, and I thought they did it very well. It kind of is a bummer because I think at the time we played it heavily, none of the expansions were out yet for the digital version.
It may have even still been in beta when we first played it.
Yeah, and so like the factions you two play are all from the expansions, and so you guys were like, man, I can't be the one that I like to be.
It is how I finally learned another mechanic, and that is another cool thing about the video game versions, or I guess the digital versions, is it can help like clarify some stuff about the game. Like you can't accidentally play by the wrong rules in a digital version of the game. Yeah.
I didn't like the Root translation. I didn't like it at all. I don't like playing it online. Maybe it's better now that it's out of beta, but I did not really enjoy it. It was hard. I think maybe because that one is so asynchronous, it was hard for it felt like I was playing by myself. It didn't really feel like it was like we weren't playing together.
You're not taking you're not doing things simultaneous or anything.
But also, I don't know. I felt like it was
a cult of lizards.
I felt like it was hard to learn the rules. I think if I had been playing a faction I already knew, I don't think it would have been as bad. But trying to learn the rules of a faction didn't really work well.
Well, and when I played the digital version, I played as like the the Corvid conspiracy or whatever that like, and that one's
The avian.
like the crows or whatever. And it's a pretty straightforward mechanic. So I may have just been doing it easy mode on that one, but
Yeah, because some of the factions in that game are definitely way more complicated than some of the others. I've also played Pandemic online, or like on the computer. They have a Pandemic digital version. It's pretty good. Pandemic is one of those. Pandemic is one of those that's like I enjoy Pandemic. It is a purely like cooperative. You're trying to like prevent a pandemic from killing everybody. It can be very challenging. I personally find it a better like single player game than like multiplayer game, just because it's very easy. Like as a team, you only get like 2 moves per turn, so it can really end up feeling like you're not doing a whole lot personally because your other people are just in better spots on the map or whatever.
Yeah.
Versus if you're like doing it like if you were playing by yourself and you can just control everything. That could be cool. Lords of Waterdeep is another excellent on like digital adaptation, I would say.
I think I played that once in like a physical version with Joe.
I do like Lords of Waterdeep. I think we should probably play that more.
Yeah, it's one that I always bring, and then everybody's like, "I am not familiar with this game," so I will choose something I am familiar with.
So we will play the Red Dragon Inn again.
Yes,
you need to just not give
good.
us options.
I've thought about just being like, well, I'm just going to bring games you guys don't know. We're just going to play a new one.
We're just going to learn tonight. No, because then we'll end up doing Jackbox.
Dylan, do you remember the first digitized board game we like played and got into?
Small World.
Oh, that was a good one,
wait,
but it's
Clue.
Before that. I was
Clue.
thinking Sorry.
Oh,
do you remember that one?
Well, because at a certain point when we were children, and this is going to date us very old, there were CDs, discs that would come in like the Kellogg's box.
We definitely got them out of cereal boxes.
And you put them into your computer because now computers don't even have disk drives most of the time. But yeah, and it was like a digital version, like it was board games. And so there was like a digital version of Clue, a digital version of Sorry, a digital version of like Monopoly, probably. Like Sorry and Clue were the ones we played the most.
Yeah.
And they were excellent as children.
So good. I would play Sorry now.
I mean,
well, and it had like you know when you go bowling and like you get a strike or something like that, and it plays the little like clip of like everything that you did in that
were
game
so good.
Would be like a bowling level
spectacular
animation where it's like it's hopping along and like it stomps on you, but it's a little bowl or something, and it's like charges them off, or I don't know. It was weird, but
it was delightful.
It was fascinating for like 7 or 8 year old me.
Sure.
So there is one thing about like the computerized versions of board games that I don't always love.
And that is?
I'm a fan of house rules for games.
Fair.
You know, they don't
they
don't always work perfectly for our play style the way they're designed. Like, let's be real, Uno. The only rules of Uno are what you decide the rules of Uno are. Nobody actually plays the same game. We just have the cards and then
1,000%. Yeah.
And you just, the people at the table decide the rules. So like for Wingspan, sometimes Aubrey and I like to play it a little less stressful and we add extra rounds and it's much happier. You can't necessarily do that in a computerized version. It's still fine. But I do love, I'm a big fan of house rules because the game is supposed to work for us. As long as everybody agrees, big fan.
Yeah. And I do appreciate that for sure. Yeah. Like, I love the house rules, but another win in the digital version column, at least for Wingspan, is the soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
The soundtrack and like the bird cries on the cards when you play them. And they went out, like they recognized that like, hey, we are an aesthetic game. And so atmosphere is going to be important in our digital version. And so it's just a great chill time playing Wingspan.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Very like calming spa music going, and then every time you play a bird, it's got like the accurate bird call from that bird that goes
Which
off.
is sometimes so nice, and sometimes it's a vulture.
They really did take the
Or an
feeling
eagle.
of the game play itself and translate it perfectly. It's just like, I'm completely calm, I'm playing birds, everything's pretty.
Yep. Well, that's how we discovered it had an app version, because they made a companion app for the game, or somebody did, where it's like an augmented reality. You can scan the cards with your phone and it'll play the bird sound. So I was downloading that to mess around with that when we were playing the Asia expansion. And then like right there above it was just Wingspan, like the whole game. And it's like $10. I'm like, hell yes.
Yeah, definitely worth it. And like you said, like just being able to have it on like an iPad or an iPhone is like a game changer, you know. I've got multiple, like, I know I definitely have Lords of Waterdeep and Ticket to Ride on my phone currently, and probably some others that I have forgotten about. So it's definitely like a convenient, like, oh, I'm like going out, I'm waiting in like an office for an appointment, or, I've got some time to kill. I'll just hop on and play like a board game.
I think Wingspan and Ticket to Ride are actually the only games I have on my phone. Like, I don't have any of the like Bejeweled, Candy Crush. What's that Marvel Snap nonsense that the kids are playing these days? I don't have that one.
That part might get edited out. So
It's the Minnesota as you talk about it.
I was going for grandma.
In the like scrolling to see what digitized versions of board game I do have on my phone, an interesting like marriage of like a mobile device and a board game. I also have the One Night app downloaded on my phone.
Ultimate. Yeah, because that is the other side of things. Yeah,
I do like
they have a lot of
the enhancements.
Well, because they've got like some that are like the One Night Ultimate Werewolf, where instead of like somebody having to memorize and read the script off, it's just like the app will do it for you, which is very cool.
And then that way everybody can engage. Nobody has to be the narrator telling, all right, now this person, open your eyes.
Yeah. They've also got the Star Wars Assault, I think it is, and Mansions of Madness, which have like the app where you're like moving around your like pieces and stuff, but it'll tell you like what's going on and do a lot of like the bookkeeping stuff on its own. And then they've got like the XCOM game, which is all like is based on the app as well. So that's kind of like one of the newer things in the board gaming space, is like taking
that blending of technology
things that we have and using those. So, and there are a lot of apps out there that just make things better, like that Wingspan one you were talking about. There is a Ticket to Ride one where you can hold your camera at the board and it will auto calculate your
No way
for you. And so that's always, like a bonus.
Yeah, I downloaded the like One Night Ultimate app just to kind of help give an explanation, because last year at Christmas we had several new hires at work. So for like the work Christmas party, like, well, we got a bunch of new people, so let's like make the whole white elephant theme something that kind of, something that you love, something that says a little bit about you. And so, I went to the board games because I love board games and I think that they all play some basic ass board games. And I was like, let me find something like neat and accessible and like kind of party-ish style. They got some like several people have younger kids. So I went ahead and grabbed Werewolf because it's also only like $15-$20.
Yeah.
And when I tell you all of these bitches, affectionate, but bitches, apparently a thing about them that they all like is candles. So then when they get to mine and they unwrap the board game and they're like, oh, so this one's Aubrey's. I'm like, yeah, losers. Oh, we all like soft towels and candles. Like, that tells me nothing about you.
I do like a candle, though.
Yeah. Well, we knew
but
that.
I wouldn't
At least
bring
Carly brought popcorn.
I wouldn't bring a candle to the gift swap with that theme.
With that explicit theme. So then I'm like, well, there's this app that you download and it's neat. And like one person kind of wanted it, but then she actually wanted a candle more. So it ended up going with the person who couldn't make it. And I was like, oh, God.
So that brings up
like, she's not going to want that.
That does bring up an interesting point, because I think a lot of people have a concept that board games are Monopoly, Clue, whatever. And anything more complicated than that can sometimes scare people, even though I think some of the stuff that we play is less complicated than Monopoly, because I still don't actually know all the rules to Monopoly.
Yeah.
So
yeah, if you play by the actual rules of Monopoly, it is a little bit more complicated.
So my question
Again,
is,
house rules.
Dylan, as an expert, what is your go-to like indoctrination game? Like, what game do you use to kind of introduce people to the fact that, like, hey, a board game's not just Clue?
Yeah. Some of it depends on like the people, you know, like if they're super into like a specific thing, like a theme or something like that, like picking a board game that fits into that theme is always like kind of a win, just because it's like, you know, it's like, oh, okay, this is something that I'm much more interested in. Just be like, if someone was super into trains and wanted to get into board gaming, it's like, okay, well, let's play Ticket to Ride, because that's like a game that shows you that there are more games, but also trains. But yeah, there are a lot of like, you know, like Ticket to Ride is I think a good example of a board game, because like a sort of intro board game, because it's not super complicated, and it gives you the sort of opens that door. Catan, I think, is another good one that isn't generally like super complicated, but shows you like, oh, okay, there are some different things here that I could do. Mysterium, I think, is another good one.
That's a good one. It's Clue-like. That's one I'll pull out to try and like on like family game nights when I'm like, okay, we've played Ticket to Ride, we've played Uno, we've played Dominoes. Let's come on, Mysterium.
I don't think Mysterium gets enough love. It's one of my absolute favorites, but you just have to have a big group for it. Well, or big group. You have to have more than 3.
You've got to have at least, I was going to say, you got to have at least 4 people. It works best with bigger groups.
It's one of my favorites. It's so pretty and such a fun concept.
Yeah, so those are, in general, a lot of my go-tos. Lords of Waterdeep is a fairly easy game as well. It's just a little bit bigger and more intimidating looking.
I feel like anything with like Meeple is probably like a decent starting point.
Yeah. And like Wingspan and Everdell too, I would say, are like fairly like easy-ish. Like that's kind of like bordering on where I don't think it's easy to get into. Like that's maybe you've played Catan and you're like, so board games aren't just Monopoly, and then it's like you hit them with the Wingspan or the Everdell, because it's, you know, it's just more complicated enough that it's starting to get into that more like. And again, like it's like Twilight Imperium, if somebody is super like, that's probably the most complicated board game that I have. But if somebody's super into like big space opera, like build a space empire sort of things, it's like, well, you might be into that enough that you
this may be a little more complicated than you're like quite prepared to go, but you'll do it for
or like the Dune board game. Like our dad is not a big board game player,
but he is a Dune fan.
He is one of the biggest Dune fans that I know, and so like, and Dune is a pretty complicated board game, and he was in it and playing it.
He will get through it for the opportunity to say the Baron Harkonnen.
He had the best time with that. Didn't we make your dad play too, Aubrey?
Yeah, I think he did. He did play at least one game, which like he's pretty down if you catch him in the right mood.
Yeah,
like he's certainly like capable of grasping all of it, but he's also like, this is pretty dang social, and maybe that's not for me. Like, there's a certain amount of like endurance that comes with some of these more complicated games too, because like Wingspan is a delight and it's chill, and like on a Sunday afternoon with like nothing going on, we'll put on like some old radio, make some scones, finger sandwiches, brew up some tea, and like my parents and I will play like 2 rounds of it, and that's like 3 hours of gaming. Whereas like, you know, it's getting a little late in the night, and like, yeah, maybe we all know Wingspan, but also that's an hour and a half of a very chill game, and that's going to like grind proceedings to a halt.
Twilight Imperium, I think, is the longest game I have ever played, and it
does take a bit.
I did not.
You baked an entire cake through that, huh?
It was a 6-layer rainbow cake. Still won.
To be fair,
Still won that
every
game.
time we've played Twilight Imperium, we were also playing with like our younger siblings who at the time were definitely not old enough for the kind of thinking that Twilight Imperium required and struggled to make decisions in that game. So
I feel like I'm gonna regret saying this later, and I'm aware of that. I feel like we don't give Dylan enough opportunity to play the games he wants to play. I will play Twilight Imperium one more time for you, and I will give it my absolute best.
I mean, that's pretty valid. I'm a little busy this year, but I am also...
What could you be doing?
I am also going to be moving much closer to you, Delaney, and I think it would be pretty easy for us to set up, like, you know, we've got our Dungeons and Dragons night, but maybe we have another board game night. Because, we've got our Betrayal Legacy game going on, and when that wraps up, maybe we start pulling some of the more complicated ones or setting time up.
I'm thinking we are going to need to have a board game night, like a specifically board game night in the near future.
I'm so down for an additional board game night. Are you kidding me?
What are you guys doing next week?
Don't know. That's a week away.
I really hate that about you.
I do know that Joe's guild has thoroughly beaten the latest raid that's come out, and now they're just re-clearing it, and he's not real interested in that. So half of our week just opened up if we want to pull Joe into some stuff.
Nice.
I got time next week.
Let's bring, instead of planning future social life for the three of us that matters absolutely not at all to the people listening to this podcast, let's redirect back into what we're supposed to be talking about, which is board games and video games.
You're the one who's supposed to be hosting and controlling this.
I learned long
An hour
ago.
of content.
Usable content.
Oh, okay. We're going to need about 15 more minutes.
So, we've talked about board games with digital versions. I'd like to kind of touch on board game inspired video games, which to me are not like board games.
Oh,
necessarily.
2 seconds. 2 seconds before we jump into that. The weird amalgam, like the penultimate like AR board/card game drop mix.
That is on my list to talk about. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So board game inspired games.
Oh,
so
you
Mario
mean Baldur's
Party.
Gate 3?
Well, that
TTRPG, but
yeah, that is basically Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, the game.
Very excited.
So
to play that.
I am excited. Well, it's Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, the game where you don't have to wait for your party to like meet up once a week to BS for like 2 hours and then only do like 15 minutes worth of progress in the campaign.
That felt very specific.
And then, but also like it is like a pre-written campaign by a like very professional studio of writers. And also if you hesitate on the more role play side of D&D, Baldur's Gate writes all your characters' responses for you, so you don't have to like come up with how you are going. Like you get to pick from a list of how to role play. So it's not like a true like improv Dungeons and Dragons game, but sometimes that's what people are looking for, But yes, board games that are board game inspired video games, which we talked about Mario Party earlier, and I would consider that a like board game inspired video game because it's like
big time.
You are moving, like rolling a dice, moving your character around, like collecting items or whatever, and then you have to do like a little mini game. Which the thing that all of these I think share in common is that you really couldn't do them not digitally. Like you couldn't do the mini games in Mario Party. Like they couldn't make a board game version of that without drastically changing what it is and how it plays,
Right.
Yeah. Well, and Nintendo has done that a few different times. They did one just with like the Mii's, and then pissing off Animal Crossing fans in between New Leaf and New Horizons. They did one with the Amiibos. It's like Animal Crossing Welcome Amiibos, and it was basically Mario Party but with Animal Crossing characters, and it may not have even had really mini games in it.
Yeah, I didn't even realize they did that.
Oh yeah, made a lot of people angry.
I think an important part of like a video game board game or like a digitized one is, especially with Mario Party, it feels engaging. Like sometimes they can come across as like I'm just clicking the button and like I don't have a whole lot of choices. I'm not really like mentally like I'm just physically here to click the button and the game sort of plays itself. And I think Mario Party gives you enough options and it feels like a whole experience, and you don't just like mentally check out when it's other people's turn either.
Yeah.
And it's pretty fast paced too.
Yeah. And it's always kind of like changing. You may have to like wait for, the 3 other people you're playing with to like roll and move, but that generally doesn't take super, super long. And then you're playing another mini game. Kind of breaks it up.
Yeah. And unfortunate, as much as it would be like really cool to be able to play with like up to 8 people, because our friend group is a little more than 4 people, I do think limiting it to 4 people keeps it from dragging down.
Yeah, for sure. Some of the other ones that I feel like fall into this category, there's a game called Armello, which is basically like, what if we made a board game that only worked online, like as a video game? You play like a character that like the map has like the king and stuff in the center, and the king has been corrupted, and so you have to like play your character going around trying to collect like items and stuff, and I think like ways to like cleanse the king's corruption or something like that. But you can eventually just like go to the center of the board and either try to cleanse his corruption or fight him and take over, or like there's or you can try to be like collecting honor or something like that, so that it ends after like 7 turns or something like that. And so at the end, if you have enough honor and no one's killed the king or cleanse the king, like that person wins because they become like the regent or something. So it's an interesting thing that does a lot of stuff with like RNG, which you couldn't do physically, but that works very well in like the digital space, which is pretty cool. Hearthstone and a lot of like even Marvel Snap, that game that Delaney's never heard of,
Never,
are examples of like a card game that only really works digitally. I would say Slay the Spire, I think, is another one, which is heavily like board game inspired. And a lot of the Jackbox games, I would say, kind of fit into this category.
Yeah.
Trivia Murder Party is kind of like, what if Trivial Pursuit, but also murder? So,
yeah.
But yeah, so I those, not as many in that category, but it's interesting to kind of look at some of the games that I
would
feel
agree
like
with your
have-
choices.
Yeah, that have a lot of inspiration from like a board game. They've also turned a lot of video games into board games. Like I said earlier, the XCOM game, they have turned into a board game. They have like Civilization, they have Bloodborne and like Dark Souls as board games.
I'm sorry,
what? They like you
Dark Souls the board game?
Bosses. Yeah,
Sounds like
maybe a card game
terrible
as well.
time.
That sounds
like a terrible time.
I mean,
What about
I
Gwent?
have not played it.
Where does Gwent fall?
Gwent, I would say, falls into that board game inspired video game, because I don't think Gwent could really work
I've never played Gwent.
as like a physical game.
That's not true. I played it one time. Unfortunately, both of my brothers were standing over my shoulder the entire time, so I really didn't play it that time.
Yeah, like some of the decks I think could work like physically, but then like the monsters deck or some of those don't work unless it's digital. And so it falls into like that Hearthstone type of category where it's like it needs to be a game, like a video game, in order for it to like mechanically work. So they did make a Monster Hunter board game. I don't think it's out yet. There's a lot of like kickstarted board games that are based off of video games that I think are interesting to look at. A lot of them are mediocre just because they're relying heavily on like it's kind of the reverse thing where it was like a licensed property video game used to be like really bad, and now in more recent days it's kind of gotten pretty good. In the board game space, if it's a licensed board game, oftentimes it's bad, just because it's like, well, we've got this license, so like we don't have to try anymore. So I think a lot of the video game inspired board games have fallen into that category. Not all of them. Like I think the Dark Souls game is generally regarded pretty well, but there are a lot that are like, oh, well, we got World of Warcraft as like our our thing, so we're going to make kind of a bad version of World of Warcraft. So the last thing I want to shout out video game wise is Tabletop Simulator, which is a digital tabletop that it's available on Steam for like $15-$20 maybe, and it's like a 3D space where you have like a table, and it's set up, it comes with like, you know, chess, checkers, your basic games, but it has a bunch of things on the Steam Workshop where you can pretty much any board game that you want you can get. I don't know that all of them are approved. Well, it's like you're not having to go to any sketchy site and download it, but
but
I don't know. I don't know how many of these companies have.
We don't know how cool Hasbro is
there.
with this.
Yeah, but it is a very cool thing. I did a lot of that also during like pandemic times, where it's just kind of like, oh, like let's get together and play board games, and it's like, well, I've got this game, like everyone get it on Tabletop Simulator, and we'll, you know, learn the rules and play it.
That's cool. Like a digital space.
Yeah.
That would be a cool thing for a lot of those, like, you know, VR, like chat rooms type stuff, to have like games cafes in the.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure Tabletop Simulator can be played in VR. I just don't.
Well, yeah.
I do agree, though. Like a VR space where you can play digital versions of board games would be pretty awesome. That's maybe the only thing that I've ever heard that's maybe go, oh, VR couldn't. It may not be just awful and a fad. That could be actually fun.
Dylan, is there a video game, or not video game, is there a board game you are looking forward to, or one that's coming out this year that you're like, that's the one?
I haven't kept, like, the issue with having so many is that I don't play the ones I have enough as is, and so a lot of it is just kind of like, I need to play the ones that I have more, and then I need to like figure out these ones that are coming out, like, are they different enough from games that I already have, or is it basically like, well, this is just kind of like the Monster Hunter game, I think would be cool, but also it's like, does it function like how does it work? Is it basically just, you know, Gloomhaven but Monster Hunter, because I have Gloomhaven already, you know? So I need to do a little bit more research, and also it's just I think it's Kickstarted, and so it's like, well, I'm not paying Kickstarter prices. I'll wait until it comes into like a board game store.
Right.
So Frosthaven's the one that came out that I would be like, yes, want to get that, you know, which is the sequel to Gloomhaven, which is pretty much just D&D, but without a dungeon master and without as much of the social side of things. Like, it's the combat of D&D.
Yeah. It's like, it's a pretty, it's a great introduction to TTRPG mechanics without a big whole character sheet and an inventory list and
It would
it's
be
like all
like
of the like spell cards and item cards.
It's a really good introduction to that.
Well, as we are wrapping this up, any last minute things you guys want to add? Anything we didn't cover that you don't want to leave unsaid?
Well, let's give a brief explanation as to what drop mix is.
Oh yes,
because I did bring that up and we didn't actually explain it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Dylan.
So drop
Dylan
mix
avoided that.
Well, I forgot about it. Drop mix, like most people, unfortunately.
Oh, so true.
So drop mix is a board game that is heavily reliant on like an app. So it's mixing sort of the digital and the board game space. You have a bunch of cards that have like RFID chips in them. And they're all like different parts of a song. So it's like, you know, trying to think of like
Sing by Ed Sheeran.
Yes, Sing by Ed Sheeran. It's like this one's got the vocals. This card has the guitar part. This card has the drums. This card has the bass line or whatever. And so you take turns, like there are a bunch of different modes, and you essentially are taking turns like playing the cards in the different slots. And so you're making this mix of like, this song has the lyrics of Smash Mouth and the, you know, drums of
Panic at the Disco.
And
or
so
Fireflies by Owl City.
Exactly. And so you're creating this sometimes awful, sometimes amazing mix of songs. and you're like scoring points as you're playing these cards, or you're just like having fun and just like mixing it up and seeing what you can do with it. And so this game was made by Harmonix.
Yeah.
And I thought it was pretty good. Like it didn't get like a rave reviews, but it was a pretty fun little, game and a cool concept. And they, sold like booster packs of cards that were like, okay, this one has like this song and this song and this song in it, and
there's like
so
the hip hop deck and this is the rock deck and yeah.
So it was kind of like a cool little thing like that. But this game event, like if you've played the Fuser game that is an actual video game, they took a lot of what was Drop Mix and created Fuser from that. And so it's a very, granted, I don't think you can buy Fuser anymore either. I'm pretty sure it's maybe you can still buy the game, but you can't buy like any of the DLC or something for it. But yeah, no one played that game either, unfortunately, because it was pretty awesome.
Nobody is doing like music and rhythm games like Harmonix because they're probably so expensive to make with the licensing for all of the songs.
Yeah.
And as Harmonix has proven, they're wildly unprofitable.
Yeah,
but like,
except like Rock Band,
they're
like, that's the
so
only one.
good. Like,
yeah,
I need Rock Band 5,
or just like a new
instruments
pack where you can get the instruments again because they're all getting kind of old. As long as they keep releasing tracks for the new game, which I think they release a few every week. So
yeah. Last few times I've booted it up, the servers have been down, but I haven't like gone to check and see if that's not just a my internet issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I see new songs for Rock Band, like whatever the newest one was, every week. So
that's good.
So they are still releasing songs, but that's like the only game they're releasing them for, and the instruments are all years and years old at this point. So,
but yeah, like you had Drop Mix for a while, and then we're like, man, this is kind of neat, and then you introduced it to Andrew, and he loved it.
Yeah,
and so then he actually asked for it for Christmas, and we played it quite a lot.
Yeah, it is a cool game, and I'm sad they may still like that one's a lot easier to get a hold of than the Fuser game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are still like packs and the device floating around and everything. But yeah, I sent Andrew a video at the Ed Sheeran concert of the "Sing Whoa," because that would like totally overwhelm like any other card you laid down.
Yeah.
I did a quick check while you guys were talking about that. Risk is available on mobile if we wanted to use that to destroy years worth of friendship.
That's fair.
The fact that you would even suggest playing Risk is putting our friendship on thin ice.
Right. There is a Risk legacy that I feel like
absolutely not.
But that's the only version of Risk that I would
I've never actually finished a game of Risk before.
Watch me just defending the crap out of Australia. Like, the rest of the world could have gotten nuclear Armageddon, but I'm defending Australia.
I will say,
nobody touch me.
I do think Risk could be a good game if you had the right house rules. But I would never play as written.
No.
Nope. Well, I think that about wraps it up. Thank you guys for coming on this short notice podcast and chatting. I think it was a good conversation. If you have questions about board games, feel free to look in our description for a link to our Discord, and feel free to put those in our Discord. And at least I will be there to answer questions about board games. I think Aubrey's in our Discord. I don't know. I know Delaney's not in our Discord.
I'm in the Discord.
Has anyone sent me a link to it? No.
It's in every description of our podcast that you listen to every week, right? So,
I listened to the one last week.
Good job. Week? I'm glad that out of almost 100 episodes, you listened to one. Thank you.
I listened to the one she's on.
That's fair. I mean, maybe you should do podcasts that are more interesting to me. I was excited to listen to like an hour-long Dylan rant. Those are fun.
Well, thankfully, we make a podcast for more than just you. We make it to a lot of other people. And so thank you to those people for making it to the end and listening. If you haven't already and don't mind, leaving us a review on whatever podcast service you listen to us on. helps us out. We also have a YouTube channel that you can find in the description, and we post over there. We post both the podcasts and like videos up there. And so if you're interested in, I don't know who's listening to podcasts on YouTube, but we put them there because like, why not? Or Google Music or YouTube Music or whatever. If you're hearing this on YouTube Music, leave us a comment under this so that we know you exist. But thank you for coming out and listening to it. Check us out, and we'll let you get back to your days.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Friendly Neighborhood Gamers podcast. If so, we would greatly appreciate your help in growing the show and the community by giving us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any other podcasting app that allows it.
We also have some great videos on our YouTube channel, including reviews, rankings, and other topics. We would really appreciate you checking it out. And if you want to keep up with everything going on in the neighborhood, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and feel free to jump in our Discord server.
We hope to see you there. Links for everything are in the podcast description. Thanks again for listening, and remember, stay friendly, gamers.